The sky was dark and angry, filled with heavy clouds that screamed with thunder. Each wave that crashed against the ruined city carried the sound of despair. On the flooded world of Naraya, once a shining home to millions, now only silence and sorrow remained. The oceans had risen higher each day, swallowing buildings, ships, and dreams. Lyra held her child close as cold water reached her knees. Her small home, once warm and bright, was now half under the sea. The air smelled of salt and smoke. The cries of the dying had long faded. Now, only the wind and the endless rain spoke to her. Her child, barely 5, shivered against her chest, his small hands clutching the edge of her torn cloak. "Mother, is anyone coming for us?" he whispered weakly, his voice trembling. Lyra could not answer. She looked up at the sky where rescue lights should have been. But there was nothing. The Empire had left them. They had taken the rich, the powerful, the connected, and abandoned the rest. Days had passed since she sent her first distress call. Every time she activated the beacon, she hoped someone, anyone, would hear. But all she received was static. The cold voice of space refusing to answer. Even the neighboring colonies had gone silent, pretending not to see her planet's suffering. Now the tower she hid in groaned under the force of the waves. Cracks spread along the metal walls. The floor trembled with every gust of wind. She knew it was only a matter of time before everything fell into the sea. Her child coughed, weak from hunger and fear, and Lyra closed her eyes in helplessness. Then something changed. Through the static of her communicator, a faint sound appeared. It wasn't alien language. It wasn't from her empire. It was something different, human. She froze, her breath catching as a deep voice came through the storm of static. "This is Captain Ethan Cole of the United Human Ship Mercy. We picked up your distress signal. Hold tight. We're coming." For a long moment, Lyra didn't believe it. Humans were just stories, distant wanderers, known for their stubbornness and strange courage. They were not part of her empire, and no one expected them to care. And yet here was a human voice cutting through the silence of her dying world. She tried to reply, her voice shaking. "Please, we're trapped." "The water is rising." Static roared back, drowning her words. But she heard the last thing the human said. "Hold on. We won't let you drown." Lightning flashed outside, showing her reflection in the shattered glass, eyes full of fear and faint hope. She pulled her child closer, whispering softly, "Someone heard us. Someone's coming." The boy looked up weakly, his lips blue. "Humans?" he asked, not understanding the word. Lyra smiled faintly. "Maybe angels," she said, though her voice trembled far above the clouds. The UHS Mercy cut through the storm, its engines glowing against the black sea of thunder. Inside the ship, Captain Ethan Cole leaned over the controls, his face calm but his eyes focused. "Life signs confirmed," his officer reported. 2 survivors, 1 adult, 1 child. "Coordinates locked," Ethan nodded. "Prepare for descent." "We're going in." His crew exchanged nervous looks. "Sir, the planet's gravity is unstable. The storm will tear the landing craft apart." Ethan's voice was firm. "Then we'll reinforce the hull. We're not leaving them to die." The human ship descended into chaos, lightning flashing around its shields. Every second was a battle against wind and water. But to the humans, saving lives was more than duty. It was who they were, and somewhere below a desperate mother waited, clinging to hope like a fragile flame. As the tower began to collapse, Lyra heard a deep rumble above the clouds. She looked up through the rain and saw something impossible. A ship made of light breaking through the storm. Its thrusters glowed blue, sending waves scattering as it hovered above the ruins. The sight was unreal, a miracle born of courage. A voice echoed from her communicator again. "Clear and strong now. This is Captain Cole. Visual contact established. Stay where you are." The tower shook, parts of it breaking away into the sea. Lyra screamed as the floor beneath her cracked, grabbing her child and pulling him to her chest. Just as the structure gave way, a metallic sound tore through the storm. A beam of light cut down through the rain. A human in a dark suit. Descending from the ship by cable, he landed hard, water splashing around his armored boots, his glowing visor scanning through the chaos. Lyra couldn't believe what she saw. A human, standing in the middle of the flood, reaching out his hand. "Come with me," he shouted over the wind. Lyra hesitated only a moment, then grabbed his gloved hand tightly. The soldier lifted the child into his arms and pulled them both toward the cable. The roar of the storm grew louder. The tower screamed as it broke apart, For a heartbeat, everything was noise and darkness. Then with a final flash of lightning, the three of them vanished upward into the belly of the waiting human ship. The tower fell into the sea below, swallowed whole by the storm, but above the chaos, one light remained, the human cruiser rising toward the stars, carrying hope with it. And for the first time in days, Lyra allowed herself to breathe. Someone had come, someone who didn't owe her anything, and yet he had risked everything to save her and her child. In that moment, she whispered to herself, "Humans, they came for us." The sound of rain faded as the hatch of the human ship closed behind them. Lyra gasped for air, still clutching her trembling child, her heart pounding like thunder inside her chest. The floor beneath her feet felt strange, solid, dry, safe. Warm lights replaced the endless gray of the storm. For the first time in days, she felt warmth on her skin. The man in the armored suit removed his helmet, revealing a human face, tired but kind. Water dripped from his hair as he looked at her and smiled softly. "You're safe now," he said gently. "I'm Captain Ethan Cole." Lyra stared at him, unable to speak, her throat dry, her voice lost somewhere between disbelief and gratitude. Two human medics rushed forward, wrapping warm blankets around her and her son. The child looked up weakly, blinking at the strange faces. One of the medics knelt down, offering him a small pouch of water and something that smelled sweet. "It's okay, little one. Drink slowly," she whispered. The boy hesitated but drank, his tiny fingers shaking. Lyra watched them closely, their faces, their eyes, their movements. Humans were so different from her kind, rougher, broader, their eyes full of fire and purpose. Yet their touch was gentle, their voices calm. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt what compassion truly meant. Ethan turned to his crew. "Get them to medbay, stabilize them, and scan for injuries." The officer nodded. "Yes, Captain." Then Ethan looked back at her, his tone softer. "You and your child will be fine." "I promise," Lyra tried to reply, but tears filled her eyes instead. As they walked down the clean, bright corridor, her steps echoed softly. Every wall of the human ship seemed alive. Glowing panels, quiet hums, steady power. Her son clung to her hand, looking around with wide eyes. To him it must have felt like another world, maybe even heaven. Inside the medbay, the air smelled clean and sharp. Machines hummed softly, scanning their vitals. The human nurse smiled at her. "Don't be afraid. We're here to help." Lyra nodded weakly, still holding her boy's hand as he drifted into sleep. Ethan entered the room again, removing his wet jacket, his expression calm but thoughtful. He looked at the monitors, then at her. "You're lucky we caught your signal when we did." Lyra frowned slightly. "No one else answered," she whispered, her voice breaking. Ethan sighed, his eyes darkening. "Yeah, we noticed. Your system broadcasted distress calls for days. Not a single alien frequency replied." He paused, shaking his head. "But humans, we have a rule. No one gets left behind." She blinked, unsure if she understood him right. Her world had taught her that survival was for the strong, that weakness was shame. But this man spoke as if kindness was duty, as if compassion was strength. "Why would you help us?" she asked quietly. "We're not even your kind." Ethan looked at her with a small smile. "Because it's the right thing to do." Those words felt strange, heavy, and beautiful all at once. The captain didn't sound like a soldier or a politician. He sounded human in the truest way. And for the first time since the floods began, Lyra's fear began to fade, replaced by wonder. Later, as her son slept peacefully under the warm lights, Lyra walked to the viewing deck through the wide glass. She saw her planet below, half submerged, broken, dying. Tears welled in her eyes again. But this time they were silent. Ethan joined her, standing beside her in quiet respect. He didn't speak at first. He just watched the swirling clouds and lightning. "It's worse than I thought," he murmured finally. "Whole city's gone, entire biosphere's wiped out." Lyra nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "They left us to die. They said the planet wasn't worth saving." Ethan turned to her, eyes narrowing. "Who?" She hesitated, fear returning for a moment. "The Imperial Senate. They said resources were limited, that our world was expendable." The captain's jaw tightened. "Expendable lives, huh?" he muttered. "That's what tyrants always say." He looked at her with quiet resolve. "We'll report this, and we'll make sure the galaxy knows what happened here." Lyra looked at him, surprised by his confidence. You would fight for us? He met her gaze steadily. If that's what it takes. The ship's intercom beeped softly, breaking the silence. Captain, sensors are detecting heavy movement near the upper atmosphere, his officer reported. Unknown vessels entering orbit. Ethan frowned. Looks like someone doesn't want witnesses. He turned to Lyra. Get your son to safety. Things might get rough. She nodded, heart pounding, realizing that her rescue might not be over yet. The same empire that left her to die might now be coming to erase the evidence. But this time she wasn't alone outside. The UHS Mercy adjusted its shields, engines roaring to life, humans prepared not to run, but to protect. In that moment, Lyra understood something new about these strange beings from Earth. They didn't just save lives, they stood between life and cruelty. Even when the odds were impossible, as the ship trembled slightly under the weight of the coming storm, Ethan turned to his crew, his voice calm and fearless. Let's show them what mercy truly means, he said. And far below, the dying planet trembled, not from thunder this time, but from the rise of hope. For the first time in centuries, humanity had returned to the edges of the galaxy, and this time they weren't here for war or conquest. They were here to save what others had forgotten. The engines of the UHS Mercy hummed like a living heart. Outside the window, the planet of Naraya looked like a blue grave, its oceans glowing faintly under dark clouds. Inside, the human crew worked quickly, scanning data, tracking signals, and preparing defenses. Captain Ethan Cole stood near the command console, his expression sharp, his voice steady. Report, he ordered. 3 unknown ships entering orbit, replied his officer. Markings match the Nerian Empire, but their transponders are scrambled. Ethan frowned. So they came back not to rescue, but to erase. The officer nodded grimly. Exactly, sir. Lyra stood behind them, her hands trembling as she heard the words. Her son slept in the med bay, unaware of the danger still circling them. She couldn't understand it, her people, her leaders. They had caused this. They had left her to die, and now they were returning to hide their crime. Ethan noticed her silence and turned slightly. Don't worry, he said quietly. You're safe here. Lyra shook her head, voice breaking. You don't understand. They will destroy your ship too. They can't let anyone know. Ethan smiled faintly. Then they'll have to try. The human crew began relaying data to the captain's screen. One of the technicians looked up in shock. Sir, we found something in the flood zones. Ethan leaned closer. What is it? The technician pointed to the holographic map. These aren't natural storms, look. Energy signatures, orbital weapon strikes, deliberate. Lyra gasped, her eyes wide with horror. You mean, they did this? Ethan nodded slowly. Yeah, someone did this on purpose. He turned toward her, his voice softer but full of steel. They didn't just abandon you, Lyra. They killed your world. Her knees weakened, and she held the side of the console for support, tears spilling down her cheeks. All those years she had believed her leaders when they said nature was to blame. All those prayers whispered into empty skies, waiting for rescue that never came. And now the truth stood before her. Humanity had uncovered the lie. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle. I'm sorry, he said. But you deserve to know the truth. She nodded slowly, her voice small. Why would they do this? To control fear, Ethan replied. If people are afraid, they obey. The ship suddenly shook, alarms flashing red across the bridge. Captain, incoming fire from the Nerian ships, shouted the officer. Shields up. Return warning pulse, Ethan commanded. Outside, beams of light streaked through the clouds, crashing against the human cruiser's shields. The ship rocked, but the Mercy held strong, its engines roaring defiantly. Inside the medbay, Lyra ran to her son as the lights flickered. He woke up frightened. Mother, what's happening? She held him tightly, whispering, It's okay, we're safe. The humans are protecting us. Even as fear twisted in her chest, she believed her own words because the humans had not lied. They had not abandoned her on the bridge. Ethan studied the tactical display. They're trying to jam our communications, said his officer. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Then let's send the truth before they silence us. He opened a comm channel, his voice echoing across frequencies. This is Captain Ethan Cole of the United Human Ship Mercy, broadcasting evidence of an intentional planetary destruction by the Nerian Empire. The officer turned to him. Sir, you're putting us on every channel. I know, Ethan said firmly. The galaxy needs to see what mercy looks like. Within moments, holographic footage filled the void, satellite images of orbital strikes, coordinates, signatures, proof. Billions of viewers across colonies and stations would see it. The truth could no longer be buried beneath the waves. The enemy ships hesitated, then began to retreat. They knew it was too late. The humans had already exposed them. Ethan stood silently watching the data transmit. For the first time since entering this system, he allowed himself a small smile. Lyra stepped onto the bridge again, her face pale but resolute. "You did it," she whispered. "You showed them." Ethan nodded. "Your world will be remembered not as a disaster, but as proof of survival." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of relief. The officer turned from his console. "Captain, the transmission is complete." "The galaxy knows." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Good. Then it's time to help whoever's still down there." He tapped the comm. "Deploy rescue drones. Start scanning for remaining life signs." As the ship descended once more, breaking through the thinning clouds, Lyra watched the world below. There were still sparks of life, lights under the water, movement among the ruins. Humans had a saying she had once heard in translation: "Hope doesn't drown." Now she finally understood what it meant. Hours passed as the crew worked tirelessly, pulling survivors from the floods. Each rescue pod that returned carried faces of disbelief and awe. Many of them had never seen a human before, and yet these strange beings from a distant world treated them like equals. When the last shuttle returned, Lyra found herself standing beside Ethan again. She looked at him quietly, her voice trembling. "I don't know how to thank you," he smiled, his eyes tired but warm. "You don't have to, just live. That's enough." Outside the window, the storm began to break, sunlight piercing through the dark clouds. For the first time in years, the people of Naraya saw the light again, and though their cities were gone, something stronger had risen. Faith in kindness, faith in humanity. The species that had answered a call no one else dared to hear. The storm outside was finally fading, but tension inside the ship was rising like fire. The UHS Mercy floated above the shattered planet, its hull reflecting the dim sunlight that broke through the clouds below. The flooded world of Naraya glistened like a wound healing too slowly. And above it, 3 warships of the Nerian Empire hovered, silent. Watching dangerous, Captain Ethan Cole stood in the command center, his arms crossed, his gaze locked on the tactical display. "Status report," he said calmly. His officer replied. "Shields stable, weapons on standby. Their fleet hasn't fired again yet." Ethan nodded. "They're deciding whether to talk or attack." Lyra stood near the viewing glass. Holding her son close, the boy pressed his face against her shoulder, frightened by the sight of the enemy ships above. She looked at Ethan, her voice trembling. "They won't let you leave. They'll destroy you like they destroyed us." Ethan turned to her and smiled faintly. "Then we'll make sure they regret trying." The comm system crackled to life, a cold voice speaking in the alien tongue of the Empire. "This is Admiral Trask of the Nerian Empire. Identify yourself and surrender your ship. Human." Ethan tapped the comm, his tone steady and strong. "This is Captain Ethan Cole of the United Human Ship Mercy. And no, we won't surrender." There was a pause. Then the alien voice returned, sharp with anger. "You have violated restricted space and interfered with Imperial operations." Ethan chuckled softly. "Your operations drowned a planet and murdered millions. Don't talk to me about violations." The Admiral's tone grew colder. "You will hand over the survivors and your data, or you will be destroyed." The bridge crew exchanged tense glances. Ethan simply leaned forward, pressing the comm button again. "Tell your Emperor," he said quietly, "that humanity doesn't bow to murderers." He cut the channel, leaving silence in the air. Outside, the Nerian warships began to move, their weapons charging, blue light rippling across their hulls. The UHS Mercy's shields flared to full power, its engines roaring. "Captain, they're locking weapons!" shouted the tactical officer. Ethan pointed toward the view, his voice calm. "Hold the line." The first shot came like a thunderclap, striking the Mercy's shields with a burst of energy. The ship shuddered, lights flickering, alarms flashing red, but the shields held, glowing bright white under the pressure. Ethan's crew worked quickly, countering the attack with precision. "Return pulse at 30%, he ordered. "Let them know we can fight back." A beam of light lanced from the human ship, striking one of the enemy vessels and forcing it back. No destruction, no explosion, just a clear warning. The galaxy was watching now. Millions of transmissions replaying the confrontation in real time. The humans weren't here for conquest. They were here to defend life. In the medbay, Lyra's son woke up, hearing the distant rumble of battle. He looked at his mother and whispered, "Are the humans scared?" Lyra smiled softly, brushing his hair. "Maybe a little," she said. "But they don't run away." Back on the bridge, Ethan's officer reported, "Sir, transmissions coming in from multiple sectors. Other species are watching this feed." Ethan's lips curved into a small, tired smile. "Good. Let them see what mercy looks like under fire." Another barrage shook the ship, sparks flying from a console. The engineer shouted, "Minor damage on Deck 3, but systems holding." Ethan steadied himself, eyes burning with determination. He opened the wideband comm again, his voice echoing across the system. "To all who can hear me," he said, "this planet was destroyed by those who called themselves civilized. We came to save what was left, and we will not abandon them again." His voice carried the weight of truth and conviction. Reaching ears across countless worlds, the enemy fleet hesitated, the Admiral's voice returning, now uncertain. "You think one ship can stand against the Empire?" Ethan replied with quiet strength. "One ship with the truth is stronger than 100 built on lies." The silence that followed was heavy. Then slowly the Narian ships began to turn away, their engines flaring as they withdrew into the void. They knew the galaxy had seen. They knew the truth was already spreading like wildfire. There was no way to bury it now. The bridge erupted in quiet cheers. Ethan exhaled deeply, leaning against the console, relief flickering across his face. "Status?" he asked. "All systems stable." "Captain," replied his officer, smiling. "We made it." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes shining with tears. "You stood against them," she whispered. "For people you didn't even know." Ethan looked at her, his tone gentle. "That's what it means to be human." She nodded slowly, feeling the words echo inside her heart. Outside the window, the last storm clouds of Naraya began to break apart. Sunlight poured through, golden and warm. Touching the water below, the human ship hovered in the light, a symbol of defiance and compassion. To the survivors below, it looked like hope descending from the heavens. As the ship stabilized orbit, Ethan gave his final command for the day. "Send relief pods to the surface, drop supplies and medical drones." He looked at the glowing planet below and whispered softly, "Let's help them rebuild." The storm had broken, but something far greater had begun. The galaxy had seen the truth of humanity. Not just their strength, but their heart, and in the silence that followed, a single thought echoed through every survivor. The humans had come not as conquerors, but as saviors. Days passed since the battle ended. The storms of Naraya finally grew quiet, leaving behind a strange peace. The once violent waves now moved gently, reflecting sunlight like liquid gold. Where there had once been screams and thunder, now only the soft hum of rebuilding could be heard. From the orbiting UHS Mercy, drones and aid pods descended every hour. They carried food, medicine, and shelters for the few who had survived. Humans worked side by side with the alien survivors, teaching, helping, repairing what could still be saved. The smell of salt was still heavy in the air, but the taste of hope was stronger. Lyra walked among the survivors, holding her son's hand. He had grown stronger, smiling again, his laughter like a small beam of sunlight in the ruins. Everywhere she looked, humans were helping her people. Soldiers turning into builders, doctors turning into teachers. No one asked for payment. No one demanded loyalty. They only said one thing: "You're safe now." Ethan Cole stood on the beach, his uniform wet from the sea spray. He watched his crew coordinate supplies, guiding alien children away from danger zones. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of everything he had seen. A flood could wash away cities, he thought, but not courage. Lyra approached him slowly, her son hiding shyly behind her. She bowed her head, voice soft. "Captain Cole, High people owe you everything." Ethan shook his head gently, smiling. "You owe us nothing, Lyra. You survived. That's what matters." She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You didn't have to come, but you did." He looked out at the waves, his tone distant yet kind. "No one should die unheard. Not while humans still breathe." Her son tugged on Ethan's coat, his small voice curious. "Captain, will the humans go now?" Ethan knelt down so his eyes met the child's, smiling faintly. Someday, yes, but not until your world can stand again. The boy nodded, his eyes wide with trust. Then we'll fix it together. Ethan laughed softly. That's the spirit. Behind them, the human crew was setting up solar shelters and clean water systems. Lyra watched as humans worked without rest, their machines humming quietly as they rebuilt piece by piece. Her people had never seen such cooperation. No orders, no hierarchy, only teamwork. It was strange and beautiful, a way of living built not on fear but on choice. Later that evening, as the sun began to set over the quiet sea, Ethan stood on a ridge overlooking the ruins. He turned on his personal recorder, broadcasting one final message to the galaxy. "This is Captain Ethan Cole of the United Human Ship Mercy," he began, his voice steady. "What happened on Naraya will not be forgotten. An empire tried to hide its crimes behind the clouds, but truth always finds light." He paused, looking toward the people rebuilding below. "Humanity didn't come here for revenge. We came because it was right. We came because we could. And because someone had to." Across the stars, millions watched his words live. Some saw defiance, others saw warning, but most saw hope. For centuries, humanity had been viewed with fear or suspicion. Now, they were seen as something else, and as guardians, as healers, as friends. When the message ended, the galaxy was silent. No one dared to respond, but every ruler, every citizen felt the weight of those words. The Mercy had shown that kindness could be stronger than fleets, that empathy could defy empires. Back on the planet, night settled gently over the camps. Lyra sat near a small fire with her son, the stars reflecting in their eyes. Her child leaned against her shoulder, sleepy but smiling. "Mother, will Captain Cole stay forever?" he asked softly. She looked up at the human ship glowing in the sky and smiled. "Even if he leaves, his light will stay." In the distance, Ethan stood near the shoreline, watching the waves roll softly against the sand. The stars shimmered above him, and the hum of the Mercy echoed faintly in the air. He spoke quietly to himself, words carried away by the wind. No one gets left behind, a simple vow, but one that would echo across worlds in the years that followed. Humans and Narians built a new colony together. They named it Haven's Reach, a place where survivors of any race could find refuge. Lyra became one of its first leaders, her son growing up alongside human children, learning their stories and teaching his own. And far beyond the stars, the name UHS Mercy became a legend whispered among the lost. A ship that came through the storm, a captain who defied an empire, a story told not through victory, but through compassion generations later. When travelers passed through Haven's Reach, they would see a statue standing at the harbor, a woman and child being lifted from the water by a human in armor. Below it, a single line engraved in both languages read, "When the flood came, they reached out their hand, and high above." Among the endless stars, the Mercy continued her voyage, ready to answer the next silent call for help. Because as long as humanity sailed the stars, Mercy would never be forgotten.